High Street, one of the character areas of Lincoln. The backbone of the area is High Street, but roads running off to either side of this long street are included as well. The particular stretch of High Street we're concerned with here runs from the bottom of the straight down to the church of St Mary le Wigford by the railway crossing. It's a stretch of some 500 metres that forms the main shopping area of the city. Read its buildings, streets and public spaces and you can follow a story of 2,000 years of change and development. High Street follows the line of Ermine Street, a major Roman road stretching from London in the south to York in the north. The road probably dates to around 60 AD, when the Roman fort was founded on top of the North Escarpment. The location provided the perfect defensive position for the Roman army, but the crucial factor in Lincoln's foundation was the point where Ermine Street crossed the River Witham. That crossing point has been in use since the city was first established and survives now in its medieval form halfway down the High Street. Lincoln prospered during its Roman occupation, becoming one of only 3 colonias in England in 90 AD. The fortress on the top of the hill was extended to the south, and a wall was built along the northern banks of the River Witham. Guildhall Street, running east-west through the area, passes just south of where the Roman wall would have been. The medieval stone bow at its centre stands just south of the original Roman South Gate and still forms the gateway into the old southern city. High Bridge across the River Witham was built in the 12th century. If you look from the riverside, much of its original stone vaulting survives in the current bridge. High Bridge formed the new southern boundary of the city. Beyond it to the south developed a suburb known as Wigford, served by the church of St Mary le Wigford. The church tower shows it to date from just before or just after the Norman conquest, by which time the suburb was well established. As part of the city's growth and reorganisation, new roads were built, and many of the streets on either side of High Street are medieval in date. Several of them led to gateways in the city walls. To the east of High Street, Clasket Gate and Silver Street were busy streets, converging at the former eastern gateway to the city. The triangular area was a former marketplace, funnelling into the East Gate. High Street was a busy place too, and land either side was divided up into a series of narrow strips known as burgage plots, running perpendicular to the road. Shops and houses fronted these strips, and many of the building plots of modern buildings follow these older medieval plots. You can get a good idea of the plots by exploring some of the alleyways which run off High Street, such as Much Lane and Swanpool Court. Bit by bit, market stalls and buildings at the front of the burgage plots were rebuilt and consolidated to form the building lines you can see along roads in the area today. These phases of redevelopment often reflect the changing fortunes of the city, as high streets all over the world still do today. Up to the middle of the 14th century, Lincoln's prosperity increased, and central areas of the city, on either side of the High Street, began to be settled. More churches were built to serve the many parishes that divided up the city centre. Just south of the river, St Benedict's Church survives, and the graveyard, but not the church, of St Martin's survives off the west side of High Street, in the far north of the area. There were more churches, but many have since been replaced by shops and offices. Cornhill, towards the south of the area, partly occupies the former plot of St John's Church, which was demolished in the 16th century to make way for the corn market. The Stone Bow, which is the only building to straddle High Street, was built at the end of the 15th and beginning of the 16th centuries. It's been used by the City Council since the 16th century and today is still used to convene the city's council. The oldest buildings in the area date from this period. Timber-framed buildings, such as the fine 16th century example on the west side of High Bridge, are typical of this period. Today, the overall impression is of modern shop fronts, many of them only the most recent of a series of redevelopments over the years, in response to change of ownership and changing consumer demand. However, if you raise your eyes above the shops at ground floor level, you'll see the upper floors are often quite unrelated to them. Look down and this is a standard busy shopping street. Look up and you are taken on a journey through styles and centuries, which tells an altogether more complex and interesting story. A story that speaks of continuous occupation over centuries and the changes that this has produced. Of development, often plot by plot, which produces a constantly changing building line. Often, a run of 5 or 6 highly individual properties will range across 4 centuries in date. Many buildings here compete for prominence, with strikingly ornate decoration or prominent use of stone reflecting their high status. You can see this particularly in the banks. However, many buildings are much more subdued, particularly in the far south of the area. These speak of more austere times, showing how the fortunes of High Street and Lincoln itself have continued to wax and wane over the centuries. There are many modern buildings on the High Street, often built by large modern chains, whose different commercial imperatives demand more space for their merchandise. There are several examples of large plots that have been redeveloped out of several older plots. In such buildings, especially the 20th century examples, areas outside the immediate gaze of shoppers, such as their first floors or side walls, their side and back views, can often be blank and inexpressive. Step off the High Street and walk westwards along the river, and you can see this quite vividly. More modern buildings in the area have prominent concrete features, both in construction and decoration, and tend to have horizontal rather than the more traditional vertical windows. But in one respect, they're no different from their older neighbours. Just like them, they are absolutely typical of their own times, bringing a new strand to the complex story of Lincoln's commercial centre. This video is one of a series exploring the sense of place of the many distinctive areas of the city of Lincoln. Explore the Heritage Connect website to find out more about this or other areas of the city. As well as many videos, you'll find a huge amount of further information there. But best of all, wherever you are, keep your eyes open for more clues to the city's fascinating history.